Tom Russel is the Chief Meteorologist at CBS21 WHP. So Britt, if you want a forecast on when we can go tubing, I think we have a great resource right here. Tom loves the challenge of central Pennsylvania weather. He's covered major flooding in 2004 and 2011, big snow in 2003 and 2010, and last year as well, and every severe thunderstorm and tornado in between. So in TV business, we often talk about watching what they're doing across the street, watching what the competition is doing. So Tom and I work across the street from each other, figuratively in that we're competition, ABC27, WHP, but also literally because our buildings are across the street from each other. You could hit a golf ball from his station to my station. And even though Tom is the competition, I think anyone who works in this industry knows that he is someone that is very easy to stand up and say nice things about because he has a really great heart for the community and for serving this community. Tom spends a lot of his time raising money and awareness for local charities, including the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, the American Cancer Society, and the American Heart Association. He also spends a lot of time visiting schools and teaching kids in this area about the weather. Tom has received many awards throughout his career. He's earned the American Meteorological Society seal, that was a mouthful, as well as the National Weather Association seal. Tom and his wife have 3 daughters and 2 Dachshunds known as the Weather Weenies. And with that, I would like to introduce Tom Russel, and let's give him a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much. When I stand up here, I feel like Melissa McCarthy doing Sean Spicer. She does so good. Amanda, thank you so much. You were very kind in your words. And, when I saw Amanda here, I thought we'd have to have like one of those MMA throwdowns, 27 versus 21. After the baptism of his baby brother in church, little Johnny was sobbing all the way home and in the back seat of the car. And his father asked him 3 times, "What's wrong?" Finally, the boy replied, "That priest said he wanted us to be brought up in a Christian home, but I want to stay with you guys." A Jewish couple had a son who was a holy terror. When he got to be of age, he was kicked out of every school they put him in. Finally, desperate, the father goes to the rabbi for advice, and the rabbi says, "Put him in Catholic school." Shocked, the father asks if the rabbi is sure. "Yes," is the reply. So the father takes him to the nuns and leaves. An hour goes by, then 2 hours, then lunchtime. Finally, at 3, the son comes home, and he says, "Good afternoon, Papa. Good afternoon, Mama." He goes to the table, starts his homework. The father is amazed and finally asks why he stayed in school all day, why he's behaving so well. The son looks up and says, "Papa, when you left, the Mother Superior told me they did not allow rowdy boys, and then they took me into my room. Papa, they mean business. They've got a Jew nailed to a cross in every room." What do you call a sleepwalking nun? A Roman Catholic. Rough crowd, rough crowd. What do you call it when Batman leaves church early? Christian Bale. You can tell me this is going to be such a rough crowd here. Amanda mentioned a little bit about me. Good Catholic family I come from, so I'm the last of 9 children. Anybody in here have more than 5 in their family? Amanda, where do you come from?
I am one of 6 kids.
Oh, very good. Let's hear it for Amanda, one of 6. It's pretty rare these days when you hear of families of more than 6, wouldn't you say? So I'm the last of 9. Went to Catholic school for grades 7 through 11, and then I went off to the University of Dayton, a Catholic college. And my job throughout college was actually sacristan. That's the person that takes care of the chapel. And so I was around the liturgy folks a lot. A lot of my spiritual growth, though, actually occurred outside the Catholic Church. In high school, I was involved in a group called Young Life. Anybody ever hear of Young Life? Yes. Awesome. Young Life. And then I was also involved in college with Campus Crusade for Christ, in addition to the campus ministry on the Catholic side of things. So I've been involved with a lot of interdenominational groups that stressed a personal relationship with Christ, and I think that's what kind of attracted me to that side of things as well. I've been married for 20 years. As Amanda mentioned, we have 3 daughters. The oldest is 18, getting ready to go to college next year, and that freaks me out. The next one is 15. She's a sophomore. And then I have a 12-year-old who's in 6th grade. So all girls. And even the dachshunds are girls, by the way. So I can't escape it. We attend Holy Name of Jesus Church in Lower Paxton Township. Anybody? All right. Holy Namers, all right. I do remember, though, when one of my girls was little at Mass, I would kind of hold her up and I'd whisper who everyone was. I said, there's the priest, there's the deacon, these are the altar servers. And she looks and she thinks and she goes, which one's the bacon? Oh, no, deacon. So that's still a joke in our family. But she actually said bacon. So when Chris asked me to speak, of course, I was more than happy to join you. I was actually asking you when I could do it, right? But as I thought about it, I wasn't sure what to talk about because, we're almost maybe a generation difference. And so when it got closer, Chris asked, what exactly would I be talking about? So I tried to think of what I could focus on. So I need to be speaking about something that I know, something that, that I've experienced, what my experiences are. So I'd like to address spirituality and the family in the digital age. So Britt kind of alluded to that. So what I'd like this to be is more of a dialogue. So feel free to jump in with questions or comments, or if you have some thoughts, please feel free to share. So I will start with this premise. I think there are the two worst things to happen to family and community over the last 50 years. Number 1, air conditioning. Number 2, the Sony Walkman. So allow me to explain. Air conditioning ruined community by forcing people off the front porch and into the house. We no longer know who our neighbors are. AC is why large populations here in the Rust Belt states moved, here in the north, moved to the Sun Belt cities in the south. Of course, Florida would have never been developed without air conditioning. Anybody ever live in Florida? I spent 6 years there. It's great, but believe me, if you don't have AC, you don't stay in Florida. And with that, even people in Florida tends to stay inside in the AC. They run, just like we do in the winter, they run from their car to their work, to the pool, or wherever they're going. So not that I'm against air conditioning, mind you, not at all. In my house growing up, of course with 9 kids, Dad was always trying to save money, so we never turned the AC on. So one time he actually bought an air conditioning unit in the window for himself. So you'd be sitting there in your bed, like stuck to the sheets, sweating, and then you could hear the hum of Dad's air conditioning in my parents' bedroom. It used to bother me very much. But so air conditioning 1. Number 2, the Walkman came on the scene in 1980. So what it did is it was the first introduction of individualized entertainment. And this one's key to me because from that point on, entertainment was not a shared experience anymore. So when I was young, you all listened to whatever Dad had on in the car, right? So if you were going on a long drive and Dad was listening to Elvis or Sinatra or whatever it was, you were forced to listen to it because you were forced to, you were subject to whatever was on the radio. And then at home, we only saw what Mom and Dad allowed us to see. In my house, TV was a rare treat. It was treated as, we only watched certain things at certain times. It wasn't, you couldn't just walk in the living room and turn on the TV. I'm sure you know with 6 kids. So it went from, parents yelling to their kids, turn that music down, to he can't hear you with the headphones on. He's not going to respond to you. So there was this cultural shift. And I think that's the important part of it. When we don't share entertainment, we don't share our culture anymore. And now, as you know, with the internet and all the available things that you have right on your phone, we're torn in so many different ways. And then you combine that with how busy we are, not only don't we share culture anymore, but we don't even share the concept of family. And I see it so often in our peer group that, families don't even know what it is to sit down and have a meal together. My middle daughter has a boyfriend right now. Parents are divorced. He's fascinated by the concept that we sit down and eat together. And it's sad to me that he's never really experienced that, to no fault of his own. Give you an example. As a kid, my family had the soundtrack to Jesus Christ Superstar. Anybody ever see Jesus Christ Superstar? I loved that. The part where Pius is talking like this. That still resonates in my head, you know? So we had this soundtrack and, you know, it'd be played in the house or whatever. And I remember that so well. So several years ago, Jesus Christ Superstar was being put on at the Lohr Center down in Shippensburg. And I took my daughter to see it there. And I really wanted that connection. I wanted her to know those songs like I knew them. And we really had a unique experience because I knew the guy down there, and she was able to go backstage, and she met the Christ character, and I have this great picture of her and Christ. I'm like, oh, that's cool, you met Jesus. Those kind of experiences that I wanted to share with my kids, but I really had to make that happen. I don't think those things just happen because we don't share culture like we used to. Which brings me to social media. So I've watched it creep in and engulf my kids' life and my life as well, and the way it has with all of us. I mean, we're all pulling out our phone from time to time to see, you know, who's talking to us, who's messaging us. And what happens is our self-worth gets wrapped up in those posts. And the scary thing is our kids have no idea what they're up against. They're exposed to things they're not ready for. They're not ready to process ideas and concepts and things that they just see. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of this political stuff. I didn't talk about politics when I was 12. You know, now kids are just infiltrated with that every day. So I think it's hard enough to be a teenager, but now it's just so much harder. Your home used to be your escape. So if you were having a bad day at school, you could come home, you know, go up to your room and chill out. You can't do that anymore because there's the constant beeping. There's the constant, somebody's trying to reach me. And it's going on and it never ends. So your home used to be your escape, but no more. Bullying is so prevalent. And bullying, I think, it can be so subtle. So for my experiences, you can be bullied by omission. You know, we always think of the bully as the guy stealing your lunch money, but with girls, and you girls know, it's rough. It's rough, and it can be so disguised, so subtle, but it's still there. So I asked my wife for some input on this talk, and she was confused why people have to go to a bar to talk about spiritual things, but I tried to explain that to her. I said the speech, it gets really good as it gets going, right? The more beers you have, the more you talk. But one of the things, you know, we tried to remember back, and it's amazing as parents how quickly things change. But when we first had our kids, you know, we tried to limit kids' access to, you know, like TV. So there was no TV in their room. We watched what they watched, and, you know, you see these stupid shows like Caillou. Anybody know who Caillou is? No Caillou in my house, all right? You might be Canadian and all, but no thanks. So we tried to really limit them to what they saw. But my wife quickly learned that, she put it this way, isolation is a bad alternative. And by that I mean, what we found quickly was that if you didn't have an iPod at the time, that's what the kids were on, and that was the first access to like texting. If you didn't have one, and Susie down the street was having a party, you didn't get invited. Not that Susie didn't like you, but you didn't have the iPad to get the invitation. So my wife quickly learned that isolation could be a bad alternative to being overprotected. I'm still not so sure about that. I go back and forth. But the next step was, as they got more sophisticated, we tried to restrict apps. We had the Apple password. You know, they couldn't download anything without us. But they're smarter than we are. So, you know, do you think they have an Instagram account, right? Well, along comes fake Instagram, Finsta. Well, I didn't know anything about that. So they're always 3 steps ahead of us as far as, you know, you're laughing because you know about this stuff, right? So always 3 steps ahead of us as far as, you know, trying to stay relevant in their life and trying to guide them in their life. So my wife thinks that birth order has a lot more to do with how kids turn out than anything else, but that's a whole other talk altogether. So, one of the first things that a guy will ask a girl in high school these days, and they'll ask it very casually, what do you think one of the first things a guy will ask for a girl for in high school? A what?
So, you have your number?
Worse.
You have your Facebook?
Close. You're on the right track?
Your Snapchat?
A nude picture. A nude picture. And my girls tell me this all the time. It's so casual, like it's like asking for a phone number. It's like asking for your Snapchat. Send me nudes. And that's just to see if you're interested. I'm like blown away by this. So the sad part is, to them, it really is no big deal. And the worst part is, the girls do it. So if you try to say no, you're the weird one. And think about that age that, you want a guy to like you, you're insecure. It's just this one picture. Next thing you know, it's everywhere. So you're dealing in an age where, as I mentioned, kids can't handle these concepts and try to, stay ahead of these things. And it's just, they shouldn't have to think about that. They shouldn't have to think about, oh my gosh, a picture of me naked is going to be all over school tomorrow. So my kids Snapchat all the time. And I'll sit there and I'll look at them, and they literally have this thing in front of them 24/7. So it's like having a mirror in your face all the time. So think back when you were, a middle schooler, and your face is breaking out, and you got zits. So every time you pick that up, you're reminded of, that's who I am. And then you're up against this fake world that says you gotta look perfect, and you gotta look like this, and all the pictures you're seeing that are just ideal. So I just don't think that's healthy. So I certainly don't come here tonight like with all the answers, because I don't. But that's why I'd love to get your feedback, because as a dad, I'm like, put the stupid thing down. But that's too simple, because it's part of who they are. It's part of how they've grown up. So I look like the way out of touch dad if I say that. But I know it's not good to their soul and their psyche when they're never going to be able to live up to that ideal. So I think social media is so fake, and Facebook is all about the perfect family. And I wanted to share one of these articles that I found. And it was talking about For Real Fridays. It comes from the Spirit-Led Woman. Is social media killing your spiritual life? Comparing yourself to what you see on Facebook can be hazardous to your mental and emotional health. After all, everybody you see on your feed seems to have it all together. Most of what you see are beautiful kids, dream vacation photos, and perfect lives that everyone else is apparently living. By comparison, the daily routine of our mundane lives doesn't measure up. The author says here, I can sum up my problem with Facebook with one example. I have something like 1,000 guys that I'm friends with on Facebook. One of those guys makes a gourmet dinner for his wife, 999 do not. The one guy's wife takes a picture of it, posts it online, and brags about how awesome the guy is. Now the other 999 of us are bums because we weren't as awesome as that guy. They find themselves stuck in the comparison trap, and they just can't take it anymore. This isn't just a theory. I did a little research and found numerous articles that link depression to the rise of social media. Here's one from Healthland, Why Facebook Makes You Miserable. Here's one from Huffington Post, Why you feel terrible after spending too much time on Facebook. So this author went on to, the idea, the concept of Throwback Thursday. You post pictures from way back. So his idea was to officially introduce For Real Fridays. On Fridays, we invite you to share a picture or a brief post from your week that captures the honest and not so perfect parts of your family life. So some of the ideas, suggestions of what to take: a picture of your messy playroom, the floor of your minivan, your craft failures, your unhealthy dinner, the uncoordinated outfit your young child picks out for herself. As for you Disney people, while pictures of your kids with Elsa and Anna are nice, we want to see pictures of the 4-hour-long line that you had to stand in to take that picture. So I thought some of those concepts were actually pretty good and pretty true. So when I mentioned my kids while doing this talk, I look at their lifespan, and in their short time growing up, they've grown from nobody could have a phone in school to now the school actually encouraging to use your phone in school, supposedly for studying and whatnot. But did you guys have phones in school? Nobody did, right? Yeah, so you're just past that. But think about what you would have done if you had a phone in school. Between the temptation to cheat or pass a note or text somebody, I mean, it blows my mind. So I was thinking, as a matter of fact, if schools were to try to ban phones now, the biggest pushback would come from the parents. Parents now have this expectation they can reach their kids whenever they want, wherever they want. And I have parents tell me, well, how would I be able to pick them up? When I was a kid, I'll meet you at the front door at 3 o'clock, you know? It's like that concept is gone, long gone. But my kids, you know, they grew up with smart boards in their classrooms. So there's an expectation of electronics in everything they do. Another insight from my daughter, she said, if you try to remove the electronics or isolate them, they will rebel and seek it more. And this has been the age-long, you know, trouble with, you know, if you keep alcohol from a kid, he's just going to want it more. So as a dad, I struggle with that because, again, I know ultimately restraint or being able to put electronics in some kind of perspective is good for them. But if I totally keep it from them, they're going to crave it more, they're going to want it more, and they're going to be the odd man out. So it's a tough call from a dad and a dad's perspective of trying to guide a heart. Do you really keep it away from them? So all of these things lead to what I consider moral and ethical questions, which bring us back to the spirituality, you know, kind of putting that at the forefront of how we approach all these things. What do you believe and why? And a couple of things I'd like to point out. Social media is a little bit dangerous, and I think this is really cool that you have this group here because you have a lot of diverse backgrounds, and I'm sure you guys have different careers and some of the things you're trying to do together as a group. But what we find now with social media, and Amanda, you and I know this well, they study this stuff, you know, because if we put out a certain news story and it does well, your social media feed's going to want more of that. So what you find is that the algorithms that Facebook uses, in addition to changing every other week, which has us chasing our tail, basically they say, oh, you like this type of thing? We're going to give you more of that type of thing. And this is not healthy for us as we grow as individuals because you just see like-minded stuff. You don't get the other side. So you get more and more entrenched in your own thing. So think about that as a 15-year-old when you're supposed to be exposed to a lot of different things. Oh, this is my friend who likes lacrosse. This is my friend who's into the play. Instead, you get grounded into your own little rut, and you're only surrounded by like-minded people. And I think that's so dangerous for us, especially as Catholics and as Christians, where we got to reach out to everybody. And that's what that experience, like going to Allison Hill and going, wow, this is something I never even knew was out there. And you're certainly not going to find it on your Facebook feed. The other big thing, this is a little bit harder concept to grasp, but as I've grown, what I've found is the background has changed. So what do I mean by the background? So as a kid, if I went down the street and I was just a terror and a bad kid, that kid's parents would go to my parents and go, you know, Tom's a real jerk and he needs to be punished. Well, try to do that now with a parent down the street. My kid didn't do that. I would never do that. So by background, I mean your social circle, your neighborhood, society as a whole would agree and say, hey, that behavior is wrong. Now, it's just the opposite. Well, that's his choice. He can do that. So as a kid, you get this cocoon almost of like, well, I can get away with whatever I want because we don't have that same background. And that's what's changed culturally, and that's what I kind of started with, is that because we don't have shared experiences, we're not, you know, when I was a kid, I'd go to Mass, and half the class I went to school with was in Mass. Now my kids look around and go, Dad, why do we have to go to church? Nobody goes to church. So that background changed. There's no reinforcement of, hey, the same thing my dad said is the same thing my friend's dad said, and her mom's going to back her up on that. So societally, culturally, that background has changed. So the things that used to solidify and link us together aren't there. And we've seen it in the public square where they take the Ten Commandments out of a public building. You know, those are things that if you really down and read them, we can all pretty much agree that, you know, these are good things. But we've taken that out of society. So as a kid, you're like, that's just something stupid my dad says. Instead of, oh, there's the same 10 things my dad's been telling me every time. And that reinforcement. And that's what I mean by the background. Culturally, that has changed dramatically. I put a note here. One of the shows that drives me crazy. Anybody here watch that Dance Moms thing? You're laughing, so you know what I'm talking about at least, right? So my wife sits down. I grew up with the Brady Bunch, okay? Brady Bunch, I don't know how many of you have seen the Brady Bunch, but basically sitcoms always had what? They always had a nice and tidy ending. So even if it was a nasty subject, it was usually a lesson that you learned at the end of it. So one of the things we did buy for our kids for long trips was the Brady Bunch. So they know all about Marcia and getting her nose hit and all that stuff, which is kind of fun. But collectively, my peer group watched the Brady Bunch. So, hey, if you cheat on a test, you're going to end up like Bobby did in that one episode. And that was shared culturally, like we talked about, right? Well, now, think about the shared culture. Dance moms. You get these women who are just awful examples for 8-year-old girls, right? At the same time, my kids are in gymnastics. Well, my wife said, I couldn't believe Susie said that to Johnny. And I'm like, have you been to gymnastics lately? It's the same thing. We're literally living out dance moms at the gymnastics center, and they don't even see it. But that's the background now for kids. So this is, hey, the crazier I act, what happens? I get on TV. I'm popular. So I think that whole cultural change is just so different now from what my kids are going to grow up with. And maybe you guys grew up watching MTV Real World and different things that were so different from the previous generation. So I guess to me it all kind of ties together, because if I'm not the greatest dad, at least they were getting some reinforcement from school, or they were getting reinforcement from a show they were watching. That's not happening now. And the onus is on us as parents to be so diligent and so involved in everything. All right, so I've been pretty negative up to now. So the good side. My middle daughter found this cool app called Sprinkle of Jesus. Anybody ever see this? Sprinkle of Jesus is just like little biblical truths that pop up on your phone from time to time. And I thought that was really cool, because here's me looking at the phone as totally a negative thing. And she's like, Dad, I'm getting reminded, once or twice a day that Jesus loves me, or, I should be kind, and that's a good thing. The other thing she said is that she brought up with me, as far as the good side, is one of the things she likes to do is she likes to spend some time with the special needs kids at her school, and she thought it was cool that a child, say, who's unable to speak, could have a device where they could press a button and they can actually speak, or they can laugh, or they can react. So that's the good side of technology. So I tend to be the old curmudgeon guy, like, this stuff stinks, if you haven't already noticed. But that's the good side. So there is a positive side, and I think that's our role as we go forward, is to try to draw out those positive things, like, hey, you don't always have to look at Twitter. You can look at Sprinkle of Jesus, or download the Bible app, or one of those things. Another concern of mine is that there's this push now in Pennsylvania for putting your kids in all-day preschool. The fight 10 years ago was all-day kindergarten, and everybody wanted that because, guess what? They didn't have to pay for childcare. So my wife, she's gonna kill me for that. My wife, we made a hard decision that she wouldn't work and she would stay home with the kids. And that puts you in a financial burden in today's world. So now the argument, 10, 15 years ago was full-time kindergarten. I remember my neighbor pushing for it. I'm like, basically you're asking me to pay for your child care. So it kind of bugged me. But now the push is for preschool, and the argument is, the kids do better in school and whatnot. But to me, the bigger picture is the parents are out of the picture earlier. And that's dangerous to me, because look at what we're up against. Just what we talked about in 10 minutes here. You want to, no, I want my kids as long as I can, so I can influence them as much as possible. Because I see electronics as a way to bypass the parents. To give you an example, my 6th grader now can get her grades before I even see them. Fortunately, she's a good student, and she'd be upset if she got a bad grade. But that whole idea of kind of bypassing the parents is so easy now with the electronics. Sometimes I feel as a parent like I'm being squeezed out. So we as Christian parents have a duty and an obligation to raise our kids as God commands, not to pass that duty off to others. And I can tell you, as a busy parent, it's real easy to fall into that trap and say, oh, Governor Wolf says he wants to take my kid at 2 years old? Sure. And those are all personal decisions. I'm not saying my way's the right way, but I offer you, as you guys enter into, having families, that you take that responsibility very, very seriously. And believe me, we came up with, leapfrogs and leap pads and stuff were just coming out, and we're like, this is awesome. They'll sit there and play this. We don't have to interact. I mean, sometimes as a parent, you're just pooped and you don't want to do anything. You're like, here. And now we see it all the time, right? Mom gives the kid an iPhone and they're off in their own la-la land. So while those things are good, I think we need to be on guard as parents that we protect their hearts. So how do you nurture an authentic faith in a faked world? So my concern, I look at my own life, when is the downtime? When is there any quiet time to be with the Lord and listen? Because that's what we don't do. I mean, you look at social media, everybody's yelling back and forth. You want to be the loudest thing, but nobody's listening. You can hear, but nobody's listening. And I think, part of our job, the part that I don't like, and Amanda, you have to do it too, we have to make a certain amount of tweets, a certain amount of Facebook posts, and you always are thinking, what's the next thing I can post? What's the next word? I want the next clever tweet to come from me. So what can you do? I took my oldest daughter on a mission trip to Haiti. We had an awesome experience. She got to see a world that didn't have material goods, and yet she saw people who were still joyful. Has anybody ever been to Haiti? I highly recommend it because you're blown away, because I went there just 2 years ago, and I tried to picture the worst possible poverty I could find in my mind. When I went there, it was 10 times worse than anything I could picture. And yet the people had joyful hearts. And we as Americans just cannot understand that, because they're not thinking about, what kind of car am I going to have? Going to have that cool house? Do I have the latest iPhone? And it's a concept that we are so removed from, that you could be joyful and your heart could be in the right place, even though you're living in squalor. So it was so important for my daughter to see that and experience that, and just revel in that for a week. So my hope is to be able to take my other daughters on something like that as well. The other question I had is, how do you fight moral relativism? It's so prevalent now, especially in cyberspace. You can be whatever you want. You create this image, you're perfect. You want to identify as a woman, as a man, you can be whatever you want to do. And I think the way to fight that is to give real world examples. So I'll give you something I showed my kids just a little while ago. Anybody get the Catholic Witness? Ooh, hey, very good, Catholic Witness. Give them real world examples, and it's getting harder to find, but I found this from Mother Teresa, and it says, I don't know if you can see the headline, this is a thing called a newspaper. We used to actually print on this. People would receive it, read it, and then you put us out of business with your fancy website. It said, Mother Teresa says, quote, "Do small things with great love. Do small things with great love." And to me, it's so simple, but it's so powerful. And what I try to do is, since I have girls, I actually put these kind of things up on their mirror in the bathroom. So I don't know if I ever actually read it or not, but I have stuff on there. So they're forced to look at it whether they like it or not. So hopefully it sinks in. I just want to encourage you on one other thing, because Britt mentioned this and I didn't know. My brother, who's big into peaceful resolution, and he actually teaches peace courses and things. He came and he lived at the Catholic Worker House for the last year and a half. He just left in September. And I got to see Allison Hill from the inside out, which maybe a lot of us haven't done. And to me, it was both, how should I put this? When he left, it was actually discouraging, because nothing had changed from the time he came. He spent 18 months living in the Catholic Worker House, but it was authentic. And one of the things I'm trying to leave you with here is we need to be authentic. We need to be real world. He didn't necessarily solve things, but he solved little things along the way. He saw people who, were fighting for stupid reasons. A lot of these shootings that you see, you're like, oh, another person shot in Allison Hill, and you turn the page or the website, and you move on to the next thing. You don't really think about it, but these are real people. But the stuff they're shooting each other over was, I talked to this girl 2 days ago, and that guy got mad, her boyfriend got mad, and he's still harboring it 2 days, to the point where he would shoot somebody. And you're like, we are living in some bizarre whole world, if that's what's important. And I think that's what's happening with all these distractions that we have. So I leave you with this. I urge you to live an authentic faith in a fake world. And I think you guys are going to be awesome at it. So thank you so much for having me tonight. I'd like to open up to any questions or comments if you would like to help me out as a dad in this society. Brett, you're rubbing your hands together like you had some thoughts there. Okay.
She's the young life.
So, if you're not familiar with Young Life, basically what they did was, when I was in it, it would be held at somebody's house, a kid's house, and you would sing songs, and then there'd be a message. And to me, it was so encouraging because you'd see people at this meeting who are maybe not the greatest friends or whatever during the day, and yet at night at this meeting, you could definitely see that, okay, they're not all that bad. They have a spiritual side. Was that your experience too?
Yeah, it was cool because my young life leaders were my teachers in high school, and so
Oh yeah?
it was cool to get to know them that way. And yeah, it was just definitely an environment where you just felt welcome, regardless of who you were, what type of social circle you were normally in, like whether you were like a jock or not. Or
Right.
whatever, which was cool. Yeah, it was definitely cool to see everyone mix and like become friends when at school they're normally like not.
Yeah, and I think high school is a good platform from that, because those are the times that you really start to splinter off into what you're drawn to, whether you're an athlete or a book smart person or whatever. And Young Life really addresses that. So, come on, other thoughts about social media? Am I way off the bait here? What?
I just want to ask a question.
Oh.
What's the weather going to be like?
Oh, I forgot to. Britt was trying to sue your tubing event going on. Okay, so it's going to be warm for the next month, for the next week. Okay, so pretty much finishes out a warm February, and then I see 2 more snows. Okay, so one right at the end of the month, and then probably another one that first week of March. So a little active for the first 2 weeks of March before we're out of the woods. So warm. And then cold again for March, because March comes in like a lion, goes out like a lamb. You have a better forecast, sir? Oh, okay. Yeah.
So something that I've noticed, which touches on what you've done, but maybe it's more in sync with what we're living as millennials, if we don't have kids. What I've noticed, especially in America, up here in Lancaster, not as much. I recently moved up from Houston, Texas, and when in a city that big, it's not a melting pot anymore. Because of what you said, the walkway, the air conditioning. In Houston, you don't go outside if there's...
Too hot, right?
Yeah,
too humid.
So you don't have a melting pot effect anymore, and I think that's something that we have to look to encourage, to invite people out, and to... I don't see that up here, and I think that's something that I've enjoyed very much from here.
So you think it's worse in Houston? Like more splintered, or what do you mean?
Probably about 7,000 families move down there
Every
every month.
month?
Every month.
Wow.
It's like 4.5 million person.
Wow. See, I told you everybody's moving from the cold to the sun. I told you.
So there's something else besides that with the social media, which is almost like a inertia to act. Is that people tend to stay content where they are for reasons that you said.
Right.
And,
Do you have any ideas of how to beat that? Since you moved up here, you see a little better?
It's not always about changing people. It's about finding the right people who are willing to step out of that.
Huh.
It's not something you can change somebody to do. From my experience, you make
Right.
it but that's where it stops.
Were you involved in a church community down there too, or?
Yes, involved in church community, very strong.
Did they have to go to bars to get together, or were they?
They're all Italians, but yeah.
Oh, they had to eat. They had pasta dinners, right? No, I appreciate you sharing that, because you have a unique perspective coming from a different town. I think that's what draws a lot of people to Central PA. Is there is there is a very unique, welcoming and warming feel, and I hope we don't lose that, because I think in bigger cities you don't have that as much, but in our communities hopefully we do. So thank you for sharing. I mean, hopefully we can get past some of that. But yes.
I think a thought that I had as you were speaking was about something I've noticed within society. I think is a lot of people don't want to take accountability for their actions anymore, and like talk about like
Yeah.
against moms. And I thought it was very interesting how you were like equating that, like, okay, well, if this kid's not getting reinforced in their home, but out in our society they're not getting reinforced either, which is totally true, because
Yeah.
nobody's taking
ownership.
accountability for their actions. Nobody wants to feel like any type of pain. Nobody wants to. Everyone wants to be right all the time. Nobody can admit that they are not wrong.
Wow.
Or that they are wrong. And I just think that that is so sad in our society. So I think it's important that like we step out as like examples, like being able to admit, like, I am not perfect, I am wrong, like, I agree with you, or I don't agree with you, but that's okay. Like,
Right.
you can have that thought, I'm gonna have this thought, we're still gonna be okay. Like, I think that that is something that is sad that it's dying in our society, but like, I also think that as Catholics and as Christians, like, we shouldn't negate how big of a number that we are and how
Right.
big of a like difference we can make, even if it's just like one person doing like small things. And,
Wow. No, I think you're on the right track, and I think social media lends itself to being the last word, because you always want to be the bottom one and say, see, I'm right. And I think we get caught up in that, and that incessant need to prove somebody else wrong when, I think as you age, you realize not everything is black and white. And, and I've learned that just in my own family. And there's my friend. Come on in. How are you? Nice to see you. How do you feel about spiritual things, sir? I'll put you on the spot. But like, I have 3 daughters, okay? They're raised in the same way, same parents, same environment. They're completely different. And I think that's where you're touching on. As Catholics and as Christians, say, everybody has intrinsic value. Everybody has intrinsic worth. But the problem with social media is we go, oh, this is my conservative friend, this is my liberal friend, this is my church-going friend. And we just put people in categories to the point where they're not even people anymore. They're just on a list. They're a number, they're a name, and I hate that. We have a neighbor that my wife started following on Facebook. We're not particularly close, but they're only 2 or 3 doors down, Well, she can't stand his political views. I'm like, why can't he just be Paul down the street? Why does he have to be, somebody that ticks you off? And it's a shame, because just because you disagree with somebody politically or even about faith things, we can't just dismiss people. We're humans. And I think it's just too easy because, well, I'm going to stop following him. No, I don't want to get to that point. And I think that's going to be the hardest thing for this upcoming generation, is to say, they're more than just an Instagram friend. Like, what the biggest deal in my girl's life is? Snap streaks. Do you know what snap streaks are? So if you Snapchat somebody every day, you have a streak going, 40 days, 50 days. Well, some kids have like 365-day streaks going, And then their parents take their phone away. No, not the snap streak. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it's so important in their world, Dad, just let me do the streak. And then what they do, if you can't, they give to somebody else their login, and they log in as them and keep the snap streak going. Even that is fake. You're fake in a fake world. So, it's just amazing. Come on, some more thoughts for an aging dad. Yes. Not very well. No. If you couldn't hear, her question was, being in the media, how do you model being a Christian? How do you step away from that? It's really challenging, because I think and Amanda probably agrees, that the worst part of our job is we're constantly on. And now with the stupid Facebook Live, it's like, we never have to go off the air. You're on constantly. Here's Tom putting on his makeup. And like, oh, the kids are proud. Dad's putting on his makeup. It's really hard, but I think going to church, making sure that that's important. Yeah, no kid wants to go to Sunday school, but I was their teacher for a couple of years, to show that, hey, this is important. This is another aspect, and maybe we only do, the Mass thing once a week, but it's an important part of the routine. So to answer your question, I'm not sure I'm the greatest model, but I try to do these other things. I try to do, a lot of the charity events and drag them along and make sure they see that. You do stuff for Leukemia Society, and the reason I got involved is this little girl, 4 years old, got leukemia. Well, that could have been my daughter. So I wanted them to see that, like, hey, this girl's the same age as you, and she's got to go through chemo, and she has a port in her chest, and so, I try to bring them, try to find those real world examples that are so true. So, other thoughts? Yeah, over here. Oh, happy birthday, by the way. Happy birthday. Sorry, go ahead.
So I have a couple of different thoughts. One, I wanted to share an app that I came across.
An app, you said?
Yeah. My wife probably hates different things that I come across. I work with computers quite a bit.
Okay.
So one of the apps that I came across was called Bro app.
Bro?
Yeah.
Anybody hear the app called Bro?
Bro app. That's the
Bro app. Okay.
I thought it was pretty cool. I like looking at the way things work. But the way that it works is you tell your girlfriend's name, you connect it to your Wi-Fi network. The moment you leave home, it knows it sends your girlfriend a text saying, I love you, something sweet. Change
No
your
kidding.
from day to day.
So it's a way to stay in contact, like with your significant other?
Text.
Wow. It's funny. No, but he's onto something. Because I brought that up with my kids, and I mentioned it in here. We're going to get to the point where we think of a text and we send it. That's almost like right there. That's the future, right? Bro app. But you like that idea that it...
Yeah, so I like going through technology. But anyways, the main point is, what's your recommendation for how we don't become engulfed with spending all of our time on technology, managing it, and that type of stuff? His
question was, so how do you not become engulfed in it? How do you manage it? And for us as parents, it was, at a certain time, 8 o'clock, the phone had to be downstairs. And that's become more contentious as they've gotten older because all their homework's on there. They're sharing, they're doing projects with kids. The old days, they used to give you a group project together. You'd be like, oh, and you couldn't do it until you went back to school. Well, now they give you projects that you can text each other with and whatnot. So as a parent, the first thing is literally taking it away. But as they're getting older, I'm trying to get them to get that concept of, hey, I need to take a break from this. I need to turn it off. I need to, because I think that's why you're seeing a lot of sleep issues with grown people. They say looking at that screen doesn't allow your brain to turn off at the right time and messes up your circadian rhythm. So I don't really have a perfect answer for you, but I did try to limit their time on that. But as you see, it becomes part of everything what we do. And that's why I think we got to introduce Bro app or those things that get us thinking about real people as opposed to, hey, this is just, this rabbit hole that I'm going to look at all day and get sucked into. So I think it's going to be really hard for this upcoming generation to do that. And you guys are in the professional world, a lot of you, and we get these people coming in for interviews at the TV station. They can't put the thing down. They can't look people in the eye. You know what my daughters hate the most? Making a phone call. They'll text anybody. They'll text the Pope. They will not. I was coming home late. I said, call and order a pizza because my wife was away or something. They wouldn't make a phone call to call the pizza man. They can't talk to people. That's a horrible skill to lose. I know, but they have no. So when it comes to a job interview, they're like, "What's your name?" And they're not going to text you my name. Seriously, they can't relate as human beings. That's not good. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's going to need to be addressed. So, any other thoughts? Right here.
Is there really a statistic out there that says that the first question that boys ask girls in high school is for a new picture?
I'm just telling you, it may not be the first, but my girls tell me that it's within the first 5 minutes of conversation. Seriously, it's a rite of passage because it's so prevalent. The girls do it, which is the problem, and what 15-year-old boy doesn't want that? You know what I mean? So it's like. Well, if you're, as long as you're sending, here's my address, you know. But it's really sad because it's a self-worth issue, and especially as women who are trying to grow up in a godly fashion and they're trying to be pure, God, everything's against them. Everything's against them. So, but don't be asking that question, man. It's not a pickup line, man. It's a no. It's really sad how prevalent a lot of that stuff is. So. Well, thank you so much for having me here tonight. I'm really encouraged that you guys really care about spiritual things, and I think you're going to be a great force. And I love that you're getting together for fun stuff and some serious stuff. And I think this is a really great thing that you're doing. It's a great community that you're part of. And thank you to Chris and Britt for inviting me. And I hope you watch CBS21. So unless Amanda's on, then you can watch Amanda. So thank you so much.